Hayom Yud Elul Tafshin Pei Hey Ze Hayom Asa Adonai Nagila V'Nismachavo. So Masechet Rosh Hashanah begins with the Mishnah that says Arba Rosh Hashanahim. There are 4 Rosh Hashanahs. Now, I might challenge what you know about mathematics, that most people think 4 is more than 1. But I think the message of the Mishnah is that, in fact, 4 is less than 1. Rosh Hashanah is the head of the year. And part of being the head is being exclusive. To say that actually there are 4 Rosh Hashanahs is, in a way, and we'll see later, is to tell us there really isn't the one and only, that exclusive Rosh Hashanah. And maybe I'll take this one step further into rethinking what we refer to as Rosh Hashanah, which in fact is correct ultimately, but it's less simple as we think. In the Middle Ages, there was a political entity called the Holy Roman Empire. And was pointed out that it wasn't actually Roman, it was in what's now Germany. It wasn't really such an empire, it wasn't that big, and it certainly wasn't holy. 0 out of 3. Now, the 3 first things we would probably say when we think about Rosh Hashanah, to realize that they do not appear in Tanakh itself, and that will allow us, number one, to understand a new perspective on what we're going to celebrate shortly. But ultimately, we will return and realize why, nevertheless, all we thought to be true is true, nevertheless, although we might think about it differently. Now, we'll focus on the complexities of seeing Aleph Tishrei as Rosh Hashanah. The phrase Rosh Hashanah, to give you the 3. Rosh Hashanah, blowing a shofar, and the Yom Adin, the Day of Judgment, none of these 3 things show up in Tanakh relating to this day. But we're going to focus on the fact that the Torah does not refer to the first day of the month of Tishrei as Rosh Hashanah. In fact, not only is it not mentioned, it's quite explicit that it's something else. And that something else, the Torah says, gives a date, the first day of the 7th month. In Sefer Vayikra, we're told that there is a holiday on the first day of the 7th month. So if you're the first day of the 7th month, apparently it's not so easy to call you Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year. So we're going to try to delve and understand what is this day about, the first day of the month of Tishrei, and how ultimately did it develop into being referred to as Rosh Hashanah, and why that is true, and it is also true that there's also not Rosh Hashanah. We're going to hold on to these 2 truths, but let me now open the Mishnah so we could, okay, so you see that Rav Jay's opened it up for us, or you could share it from the...
No, you can also share. You can also share a screen. I just put that there on the side. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. So the Mishnah says, so we're going to discover something about not only what the first of Tishrei is not, but what it is. The Mishnah says, we have it here in Hebrew and in English. Arba Rosh Hashanahim. There are 4 New Years, or head of the years. Bechad b'Nisan, on the 1st of Nisan, Rosh Hashanah l'Melachim l'Regalim. This is the new year for kings and holidays. Bechad b'Elul, on the first day of Elul, Rosh Hashanah l'Maser Be'ema, for determining something relating to giving a tithe out of the new animals. Rabbi Elazar v'Shimon Omrim Bechad b'Tishrei. It's actually on the 1st of Tishrei. Bechad b'Tishrei. We got it down to number 3. On the 1st of Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah is the new year for Shanim, for years, the Shmitim, for Shmita, Liyovlot, Lenetiel Yerakot, This is also relating to some agricultural mitzvot in Eretz Yisrael. Be'echad b'Shvat, on the first day of Shvat, Rosh Hashanah Lilan, K'divrei Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel Amrim b'chamisha aser bo. So there are 4 Rosh Hashanahs. What we call Rosh Hashanah is only number 3 out of 4. They didn't even put it on the top of the list. I mean, if it's bad enough that there are 4 competitors, at least put it as number 1. But you're number 3 out of a list of 4, the day that we generally refer to as Rosh Hashanah. Now, there is a common denominator between all 4 of these dates that could clue us in what apparently is happening. And here, it was mentioned earlier, Rav Avi Wolfish, who is really the founder of what's called the literary approach to Mishnah, or as Rav J pointed out earlier, Rav Kalman pointed out earlier, that just like there was almost a revolution in study of Tanakh to go back to something much deeper, to see all sorts of patterns and structures and messages embedded in the words of the Tanakh, Rav Wolfish really took that and applied that to Mishnah. And his doctorate is actually on Rosh Hashanah. So if you want to read about 500 pages on a 4-chapter, which is about 4 pages in the Mishnah, you're invited to look up the doctorate. But that being said, one thing he points out that Rosh Hashanah actually has 2 major topics. One topic indeed is Rosh Hashanah, which is that of chapter 3 and chapter 4. But the other topic is Rosh Chodesh, which is chapter 1, chapter 2. So in fact, there are 2 topics of this tractate of the Mishnah, both the new month and the new year. Now, we get all excited about New Year, Rosh Hashanah, but some of us, unless we have a lot of white shirts, iron white shirts, probably might be less enthusiastic about what happens 12 times a year, which is Rosh Chodesh. Now, there is an interesting interplay that Rav Wolfish points out, that the 2 chapters on Rosh Chodesh, each of them refers also to Rosh Hashanah, and the 2 chapters of Rosh Hashanah both refer to Rosh Chodesh in different places. So somehow there's some interplay between the 2 heads, the Rosh of the Shana and the Rosh of the Chodesh, the new year and the new month. And we will try to delve into and understand that relationship between the new month and the new year. But now get back to my claim that there's something, maybe you can say subversive, about the first Mishnah, that by proudly stating that there are 4 Rosh Hashanahs, and which means that the one and only Rosh Hashanah becomes a little bit less unique, and maybe to add insult to injury, it's put in as number 3 on the list. So I believe, and I'll try to demonstrate, that the primary message of chapter 1 and chapter 2 of the Mishnah is empowering Rosh Chodesh, to teach us how Rosh Chodesh, which is sometimes ignored, despite the fact that often in Tanakh, the Shabbat v'Chodesh, which means Rosh Chodesh, Shabbat and Chodesh are juxtaposed, implying that the new moon was perhaps seen more as a significant cosmic religious event than it is now. But being as it may, we're trying to give a perspective in the first 2 chapters about how significant Rosh Chodesh is. And one way to see that is, despite the fact that there's different opinions, the mainstream opinion in the first Mishnah is seeing the Rosh Hashanah, each and every one of the 4 Rosh Hashanahs, all falling out on Rosh Chodesh, right? We have Echad b'Nisan, we have Echad be'Elul, we have Echad b'Tishrei, we have Echad b'Shvat. So each and every Rosh Hashanah falls out on a Rosh Chodesh, which is telling us less about Rosh Hashanah and more about how significant it is that new moon, that Rosh Chodesh, which in fact, and that's what makes it such a powerful beginning to the first two chapters of this Masechta. Okay, so the message of these first two chapters is very much empowering Rosh Chodesh as a very significant point of time, the renewal of the moon. And we know that within Chazal, often the Jewish people are compared to the moon. Now let's get now I'll begin with one interpretation. Now, when the Mishnah begins the first day of Nisan, because in fact, throughout the Torah, and as I mentioned earlier, the Torah refers to the first day of Tishrei as not the beginning, but the first day of the 7th month. In Jewish time is determined from the 1st of Nisan. So and this leads to Philo, who was a famous Jewish philosopher. There's been a lot of scholarship to what exactly was his relationship to traditional rabbinical Jewry of his time. He lived during the time of the Beit HaMikdash. There were some great scholars. One of them has a street named after him, not far from where I'm sitting now, Gedalia alone, showing that many of the ideas in what is considered to be one of the great world's philosophers, Philo, are actually are in tune with much of what we know from early Chazal. That being said, what Philo says is that the significance of the first day of the month of Nisan, which is the first day of the 7th month, he does not mention New Year. He mentions it as the 7th. Number 7 is very special in Judaism. Shabbat is the 7th day of the week. Shemitah is the 7th year of that cycle. Yovel is after 7 cycles of Shemitah. So we know that 7 is a very special number. There are many cosmic dimensions to it. Maybe I'll mention in passing, a Magen David is 6 sides, which is a cosmic number. That's why you'll find it everywhere in India also, because the world is 6 sides, up, down, and the 4 directions. And so 7 would be seen as Sefer Yetzirah, a very early book of Jewish mysticism. Their reality has 6 directions, up, down, all around is 4. And therefore 7 is giving that heart, that point that gathers everything together. So 7 is an important number, the 7th day, the 7th year. So Philo says, so too the 7th month. Jewish time begins as Parshat Bo. God tells Moshe, HaChodesh hazeh lechem Moshe Chodeshim. This month will be the beginning, will be beginning for you of the beginning of the months. So therefore, the first month in the counting on Jewish time is the month of Nisan. Tishrei is the 7th month. And as the 7th month, it is the Shabbat of the months. And seeing Philo's idea, the Shabbat of the month, we could contemplate some dimensions of that 7th month. One thing I noticed, there are actually 4 holidays in the 7th month, a total of 10 days. We have what we call Rosh Hashanah, we have Yom Kippur, we have the 7 days of Sukkot, and we have that last day, Shmini Atzeret, which unfortunately has give us very painful associations, and soon we'll be commemorating the 2nd year to the war launched against the Jewish people. But these are 4 holidays. each week has a holiday, the first week, the second week, the third week, and the fourth week. And the common denominator between all four of the holidays that show up in the seventh month, that as opposed to Pesach, as opposed to Shavuot, by all four it says Shabbaton, and again Shabbat. So really highlighting that the month of Tishrei, it's about the seventh month. And this is echoed already in the Medrash. Vayikra Rabbah says all the sevens are sacred. The seventh day, the Medrash mentions the seventh month of Tishrei, the seventh year, etc. Okay, so Philo's approach is that Tishrei, it's not about the beginning of the year, and don't worry, we'll see that it is. It's about the seventh month. The seventh month is sacred. The seventh month is special. At the very beginning of the seventh month, we proclaim that this special month has arrived by the blowing of the shofar. Okay, so till now, we've been focusing on seeing this first day of the seventh month as being less the Rosh Hashanah. There are many Rosh Hashanot, but what makes it really special as being the beginning of the seven. Now, there's a question that many of you might be thinking about, so I'll already relate to it, that, wait a second, the seventh day of the week is the end of the week. The seventh day of the seventh year is the end of the Shemitah cycle. But the parallel, we would think, to be the 12th month of the year, because a year has 12 months. So the end of the year should be month number 12. How is it number 7? So, fortunately, very recently, my dear wife bought me a new watch, and it's one of these watches from the good old days. And if you look at the watches from the good old days, we could realize why the seventh month is not the middle of the year, it is actually the end of the year. That was a hint. Anyone want to try to take a guess about how is it that just like the seventh day is the end of the week, the seventh month is the end of the year, even though a year has 12 months? Someone want to mention a guess? And the hint was the watch. Paula or Michael? Nobody? Okay, so you're all very modest. So I'll show you my new watch. I'll show off my new watch. A watch, like a month, it has 12. There are 12 months of the year, 12 hours in the watch. However, the point on a watch furthest, let's say from 1 o'clock, the furthest point from 1 o'clock is not going to be 12 o'clock. It's going to be 7 o'clock. A year is a cycle. In fact, in Judaism, holidays are called chagim. Chag comes from the word circle. In Hebrew, we say magal shana, the circle of the year. A year is a circle. And in a circle, the furthest point from the circle is not going to be the end of the circle, which brings you back to that beginning of the circle. The farthest point from in any point of a circle, the furthest point will be from 1 o'clock, it'll be 7 o'clock. So the same way, if we envision a 12-month year as a circle, like the watches from the good old days, then the furthest point away from the first month will be the 7th month. So just like the 7th day is Shabbat, the end of the year, the 7th month is also sacred, not just because externally it's the 7th month, but in the circle of the year, it is the time going back or forth from the very beginning, which is Nisan. Okay? So I think this is the first part of our study today about the meaning of Aleph Tishrei and its significance in its significance in being the beginning of the seventh month, the Shabbos month, and vis-a-vis that very first month. Now, maybe I'll say an extra point about the end, the 7 as being the end of that process, and then we'll get back and reclaim Rosh Hashanah. The 7, Pesach is a holiday of the beginning in Egypt, the beginning of leaving Mitzrayim. Sukkot, in many ways, is a holiday about the end. Sukkot, and we'll see that, and for reasons you'll see later, I'll talk about why is it that Sukkot is the end. But some small point, it's referred to as Chag HaAsif, the holiday of gathering up. So we might begin planting things in the spring, but the gathering up, Chag HaAsif, will be around Sukkot, but we'll get more cosmically into this later, about why is it that the month of Tishrei is reflecting the end of the process that began at the beginning in that of Nisan. Okay, but now we're going to go back and reclaim Rosh Hashanah, although we will try to correct a phrase which I think is incorrect, that sometimes my Gentile friends will wish me we refer to Rosh Hashanah as the Jewish New Year. No, Aleph Tishrei is not the Jewish New Year. If we want a Jewish New Year, if anything, we should take our eyes on the beginning of the month of Nisan, which begins the story and the drama of ultimately the leaving of Egypt, which took place in the middle of that month in Nisan. Rosh Hashanah is not the Jewish New Year. Rosh Hashanah, what we call to Rosh Hashanah, indeed it is, as we will see, Rosh Hashanah, but it is the Rosh Hashanah not for the Jewish people alone, but for all of humanity, but for the cosmos. Okay, so let's re-share by going back onto our sources to the next Mishnah. Talks about 4 times the world being judged. Again, which undercuts a bit Rosh Hashanah as the day of judgment. Passover, Pesach, produce, Shavuot, fruit of the tree. Rosh Hashanah, all the people of the world, in the Lashon of the Mishnah, Kol Ba'olam, all of humanity, pass before him like a division of soldiers. As it says, he who fashions the hearts of them all, who discerns all their doing. And on Sukkot, they are judged in respect to rain. So quite clearly, what's happening in the month of Tishrei is all for the entire world, for all of humanity. So indeed, for the Jewish people, the year, for the Jewish kings, for holidays, for saying what month is it, we count from Nisan. But Rosh Hashanah, this indeed, the first of Tishrei is a Rosh Hashanah, but a Rosh Hashanah for all of us, for all of humanity, for all of the world. And this will lead me to the interplay between these 2 points. In general, we have a historical, most of the Chagim have a historical dimension, but also an agricultural, cosmic connection. So in many ways, the 2 poles of the year, we have Nisan and we have Tishrei. Nisan begins historical time and vis-a-vis the Jewish people leaving Mitzrayim. Tishrei is cosmic time. It is a time that we believe goes back to the time of creation, whereas one Tana brings, this is the time that the rain begins falling, reenacting that cosmic event in Gan Eden about Ve'ed Yalem min Haaretz Vishket Pnei Adama, about the mist rising up from the ground and watering the world. So we have a cosmic beginning of the year, and we have a historical beginning of the year. And this will lead us to an interplay between the two of them. So, and this will give me an opportunity to talk about what I related to briefly last time, I believe, that much of my work is in the context of within Or Torah. Or Torah, I have an institution, the Beit Midrash for Judaism and humanity, and an interfaith center that we deal with the role and place of the Jewish people within the broad story of humanity. And part of the vision that we promote is very relevant to the interplay between the Jewish historical time, the Jewish historical story, and the global cosmic story, and how they play into one another. Now, if to give you a summary of Tanakh in a nutshell, Tanakh begins and will begin the reading of the Torah in the month of Tishrei with the story of creation. The story of creation, Briat Olam, is a story of not only the Jewish people, but of all of humanity and all of the cosmos. At some point, because of a series of failures at the beginning of the story of humanity, whether Cain and Hevel, whether the story of the flood, the story of the building of the Tower of Babel, the eating from the Eitz Hadat, these four failures led to plan 2, which is the choosing of Avraham, or Avram choosing God, depending on your interpretation. But what is critical, I believe, for Am Yisrael to know, and explicit in the Torah by Avram, by Yitzchak, and by Yakov, that the choosing of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and ultimately the choosing of the Jewish people, was not in order to abandon plan 1 and God's interest in humanity as a whole, but rather to realize the way to ultimately redeem the world, uplift the world, will be start small. Focus on one person, on one family, on one people, and to that where things will succeed, at least enough to ultimately impact on all of humanity. This is absolutely explicit throughout the Tanakh. When Avram is chosen, it's not merely that Avram means Av Hamon Goyim, a father of many nations, but Avram is told, V'nivrechu b'cha kol mishpachot adama. On a number of times, Avram is told that all the families of earth will be blessed through you. And these same words, or very similar words, of all of the nations, or all the families of the world to be blessed, are said also by Yitzchak and also by Yakov. So it is crystal clear that the role of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov is not only that through them the Jewish people will arise, but through them and their descendants, blessings will be brought to humanity. And when we at Har Sinai, when we get the Torah, before receiving the Torah, the Jewish people are told that you are Am Segula Mikol Amim, you've been chosen among the nations, and to be a Mamlechet Kohanim, a nation of priests. Priests are there to serve. The Jewish people have a role and responsibility in the context of the broad story of humanity, and chosen doesn't mean better than. It doesn't have to be haughty. It could be, as the Jewish philosopher Levinas defined it, demanding more from yourself than you demand from others. And chosen is feeling that chosen with the mission, and the mission being relating to humanity. So, and this continues when Shlomo builds the Beit HaMikdash. A large portion of the dedication speech of Shlomo at the Beit Mikdash is calling out to Hashem that listen from this holy place to the prayers not only of the Jews, but also of the Gentiles that will come from afar, so that they too should know you, God. So, in other words, what is well known from in the prophecies of the end of days about whether it's Ki Mitzion Teitzei Torah, out of Zion Torah will go out from the world, or the Jewish people being a light unto the nations, or the ultimate Mikdash being a house of prayer for all people, or is embedded in the very beginning. So in many ways, I would say that part of the role, responsibility, and meaning of the Jewish people is a journey, an incredible journey that ultimately will return us at the end back to the beginning. The world began just like in the Tanakh. Tanakh begins with Bereshis. That's about the world in the beginning, humanity together, sacred and shared humanity, beauty of nature at the beginning. The prophecies in Tanakh about the end of days return us to that same vision of humanity again reunited together, and the beauty of nature reclaimed also in different prophecies, such as in the book of Yeshayahu, Yecheskel, Zechariah, etc. So this is part of the great vision for the Jewish people. So in many ways, we say the end brings us back to the beginning. If the beginning of the world was Tishrei in our traditions, Jewish history and Jewish peoplehood began with leaving of Mitzrayim in Nisan, but the 7th month, the ultimate end is bringing us back to that cosmic time of the beginning, the month of Tishrei. And therefore Tishrei and the Chagim of Tishrei are deeply filled with associations and connections and involving the nations as a whole. And to be able to remember this point that I've been making, realize that people, if you daven 3 times a day, you're saying this more than 1,000 times a year, because each of our tefillot end with Aleinu, and Aleinu ends with a vision of the future of all of humanity, calling together in the name of God, and ending with the verse that from the end of Sefer Zechariah, Bayom Ohu Yeh Hashem Echad U'Shmo Echad. The great vision, God being one and His name being one, is achieved in the future when Am Yisrael is able, as we have been doing, even though we've suffered sometimes by perversions of it, but as many of the Rishonim and Achronim have pointed out the obvious, that most of humanity know and acknowledge much of the story of the Torah, the monotheism, the basic values. I mean, if most of you are in North America, certainly the Americans, the Declaration of Independence, straight out of Parshat Bereshit. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, now they've written people, all people are created equal, the right to liberty, the pursuit of happiness, that the Creator, it mentions the Creator, the Bori Olam, and the creation. So the impact of the Torah through the Jewish people has been immense in ways that we don't always are fully aware of. And I believe that we must continue the sacred work. But being as it may, Aleinu will end always our tefillot with this vision. And Rashi on the pasuk, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Rashi writes that in the present we're only halfway there. We're only Hashem Elokeinu. Only in the future, Rashi writes, when humanity will join in belief in one God. Only then, when we fulfill the prophecies of the Kula Hashem Hashem Ulavdosh Chem Echad, the verse in Tzfanya, that humanity will call together in the name of God and serve God one shoulder. And Rashi brings also the verse in Zechariah of Bayomu Yashem Echad Shmo Echad, only when this is with humanity and not just the 0.2% of the Jewish people, only then we fully fulfill the Shema. This is the vision of the Jewish people, and this is something we must ask ourselves, what can we do to make our deep beliefs and values more present in the world? When Prince, now King Charles, was maspid Rabbi Yonatan Zaks, he said, I will deliberately misquote the Bible to say that for the people of England, Rabbi Sachs, you are a light unto this nation. And I feel Rabbi Sachs was wonderful, but we need 100, 1,000 Rabbi Sachs, and in many ways, in Torah, in other areas, to feel that the Jewish people, with our sacred Torah, to find what can we, our beliefs, our Torah, make them more present in the world. So some of this, let me share you 1 second. Okay, sorry. Okay, so I have so this book I have here, Be Become Blessed, Jewish Spirituality Between East and West. Unsolicited, it was translated into Chinese by Chinese Gentiles that led me to a trip throughout China, into Italian by Italian Gentiles. So I feel I work a lot throughout the world on interfaith, Indonesia. I just got back from South Africa. There is a tremendous thirst. Torah in motion. We have to expand it by 500 because Jews are 0.2% for Torah for humanity. This is part of the vision. But getting back to Rosh Hashanah and the connection between the historical process of the Jewish people, which Tishrei, the 7th month, represents the end of the process, connects up to each of the 3 Chagim have universal elements. On Rosh Hashanah, as we mentioned, Rosh Hashanah in the Mishna, Kol Bayolam, all of humanity are judged on Rosh Hashanah. So it's very explicit, the universal aspect of Rosh Hashanah. Furthermore, there's the Haftorah of Rosh Hashanah from the book of Yirmiyahu mentions 2 words, Avat Olam. The pshat in Yirmiyahu is Avat Olam is the eternal love, and there it's referring to the eternal love of Hashem for the Jewish people. But the Zohar already, and Rav Kook, following the Zohar, reinterprets the Haftorah of Rosh Hashanah, Avat Olam, to be not only eternal love, but Avat Olam, love the world, a calling upon all of us to love the world. Okay, moving on to Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, also, their message is that it's not just about us. On Yom Kippur, the Haftorah of Mincha is a short but incredible book, the book of Yonah. And the story of Yonah, again, is a reminder that the Jewish people have a role and a responsibility to the world. It's not easy because the world hasn't and still isn't been a safe and pleasant place for the Jewish people. But nevertheless, it's not true. It's self-defeating to think that everybody is against us. And furthermore, by building bridges and in many ways with different parts of the world, I think this could help overcome some of the challenges that we're facing. But being as it may, in the book of Yonah, Yonah is called upon by no one less than God himself to go to Nineveh to get them, to save them from destruction by having them being choser b'tshuva. And Yonah doesn't want to go. He runs away from God. He's willing even to die and just not do that mission. Now, this is certainly, and Rashi explains, it's not because he thought that he would fail, it's because he feared that he would succeed. That Yonah looked at the world through, is it good for the Jews or is it bad for the Jews? And the fact that many of the Jews were not listening to their Nevi'im, their prophets, he was concerned that if I go to Nineveh, that maybe they would listen to me, they would do tshuva, it wouldn't look good for the Jews, so better I not go and have Nineveh destroyed, because he's thinking about everything from that calculation. Is it good for us or not good for us? And the story of Yonah is a Kadosh Baruch Hu saying, no, that's not how to look at it. First of all, keep your eyes open when you read it on Yom Kippur. The sailors on the ship that Yonah is, ultimately they throw him to the water, but they're so hesitant to do that. They so much try to turn to God. They come out pretty good in the story. And ultimately, God educates Yonah that, Yonah, you should look at the world the way that I look at the world. At the end of Sefer Yonah, Yonah is heartbroken when this flower or plant dies. And God says, look, you've developed some empathy and concern for the plant, but think about it. In Nineveh, there are tens of thousands of people, and realize, I want them to have an opportunity to save themselves. And I'll mention, and this could be relevant also to current events, those that do not do tshuva, God punishes. Okay? So yes, we should hope that the enemies of the Jewish people should do tshuva. But the story of Nineveh, of Yonah, on one hand, we should have concern and outreach for humanity. We should hope to bring them to do tshuva, but clearly another message of the story is realizing that those who continue in the ways of evil, certainly those who are persecuting the Jewish people, if they do not do tshuva, it's clear from Yonah that what the fate is should be for them. Okay, now, and going to Sukkot, and Sukkot really brings us to a highlight of the universal aspects of Judaism. Chazal tell us that on Sukkot, 70 parim are brought as sacrifices for the 70 nations of the world. There was a belief that in the ancient world there were 70 nations. On Sukkot, we bring korbanot, offerings, not just for ourselves, we bring them for each and every nation in humanity. And Sukkot has that in prophecy at the end of Sefer Zechariah about in the future, at the time of Sukkot, from all the world, the nations of the world will come to Yerushalayim to serve God. And indeed, there were years that delegations of Gentiles would come from all around the world on Sukkot to come to Yerushalayim. Okay, so we have so Sukkot in many ways. and this is, I actually wrote a doctorate on this. My doctorate is Water, Creation, and Revelation, the meaning of Chag Sukkot, which I try to argue that Sukkot is bringing us back to the beginning. The Tanakh tells us already that Sukkot is the end. B'tzeit Shev, at the end of 7 years during Sukkot, we do the ceremony called Hakel. Sukkot is seen often as the end, and in a circle, the end and the beginning are at the same point. So Sukkot is connected to the end of the days, but if time is circular, in the end we come back to the beginning. And I argued that the themes of Sukkot, both of humanity together, but also return to nature. Rav Kook points this out. In many ways, in Sukkot, we return to nature. We go out of our houses in the Sukkah. We go out of we go out of our house to a sukkah that are made out of things that come from nature. Gedulei karka. We go to we take the arba minim that are reflective of four different types of nature. We bring the water libations to the temple because the world is judged again on water during Chag Sukkot, and we know in the stories of creation, water is very present. Okay, so this is the cosmic picture. I'll try to do this in a nutshell, and then perhaps share a story about Rosh Hashanah that puts these things together. So, just one moment. So we have, what did we do today? We discovered that the first day of Tishrei is, on one level, it's not about Rosh Hashanah. It is the beginning of the sacred 7th month, the 7th month, paralleling the 7th day in the 7th year, the Shabbat, the end of a process, and from Jewish time that begins in Nisan. And after talking about the beginning and the end, and how in a year is a circle, so the end in some ways would be the 7th, which is the furthest point in the circle to that point of beginning. We then reclaimed Aleph Tishrei as Rosh Hashanah from the cosmic perspective, and the story of all of humanity in the world. Indeed, Aleph Tishrei is not the 7th, the end of the process, but rather returns us to the beginning. And there's no contradiction, because in cosmic time, in the story of the Tanakh, the end in many ways brings us back, or as Milton says, paradise regained, to bring back humanity as it was at the very beginning, as it could have been, as it should be. Okay, so this is the classical Torah content. More than happy if there are any comments, and then I'll try to end with a brief story about Rosh Hashanah that reflects some of the themes that we've spoken about here. Okay, so okay, so this is I used to live in Otniel, which is a small yeshuv in the hills of Hebron. And years ago, it was Rosh Hashanah, and it was 3 days. It was 2 days for Rosh Hashanah, followed by Shabbat. And at the very beginning, the first morning, there was a heat wave in Israel, and maybe because of the heat wave, the power was overloaded, and the main switch fell down. And our house goes into darkness, no refrigerator, no air conditioning, and we have 3 days of Chag in front of us. So when I used to live on the west side of Manhattan, I could knock on the neighbor of my Gentile neighbor, hint here and there, and someone and he or she would walk in and turn on the electricity. But Othniel is a Jewish yeshuv in the Hebron Hills, and everybody's Jewish. So what am I going to do? So I meet this Chabad Chassid, and he tells me that at the nearby army base, there is a Arab Bedouin soldier. And so maybe he could help. So my stomach is turning because I'm feeling quite embarrassed because Muslim Arab Bedouins volunteer. They're not obligated to serve. So if somebody volunteered to serve in the Israeli army and he's here to protect me and my family, to have him schlep from the base to my house, which is quite a distance, in the hot sun, certainly would seem to be really not right, not fair. But I felt, what other choices do I have? So very reluctantly, I go down to the base. At the base, the Chabad Chassid shows up with the shofar. He starts blowing it, and like the piper of Hamlin, all the soldiers come out of the barracks, and he blows and blows and blows till everyone's heard the shofar. And at first, they don't find the Bedouin soldier, and I'm a bit relieved because I was quite embarrassed about having to ask him. But finally, they track him down. I stutter a bit, but right away he realizes it. Starts putting on his heavy army boots, and the Jewish commander says, "Okay, I'll give you guys a ride." I'm saying, "No, no, no. I mean, if I'm worrying about turning on the switch, getting a ride back home is certainly something that I don't want to start off my new year like that." But the soldier says, "I'll walk you and I'll walk back." And he accompanies me. It's a really hot day, and I live in the house which is furthest from the base, and it's uphill. But he seems good-spirited. He comes to the house. He turns on the switch. Let there be light, and there is light. So we're very grateful, and we naturally think to offer him to come into. Okay, this is connected. I'm adding something to the chat because actually, because this is for you to seek. This is connected to the story. Now, he says my break time is up. I have to go back to the base. So I feel the least I could do is accompany him back to the base. And we walk out of the house. He says, "You have very cute kids." So I say, naturally, "I bless you. You should also have cute kids." And then suddenly his face turns into a mask of sorrow. The light goes out and he says, "I will never marry. I will never have children." And I ask, why? Why not? And then he tells me his story. He grew up in a village and he was in love with one of the girls in the village, but she died before they managed to get married. He said, "My heart is broken. I can't imagine ever loving another person like that again. I will never marry. I will never have children." But then I said to him, on the surface, it seemed that you came to bring the light into our house. Perhaps God was guiding you that I should help bring the light back into your home. And I told him that among the guests we had that Shabbat was the young widow of one of my students who was killed in a terrorist attack on the road right near where I live. And she also is brokenhearted, but she went through a process and realized ultimately that the right thing to do is not to give up on life. And she had just gotten engaged, and she was with us for the holiday with her fiance. I'll mention they now have 5 kids. And I said, this is a sign from God that we were meant to meet, and you were meant to take this message. Don't give up. Don't give up on love. Don't give up on life. When I came home, I thought about how symbolic that this encounter with this Bedouin shoulder took place around the box, the electric box. Because what does it mean when the power falls? It it's that for electricity to bring light, you have to close the circuit. And on a human level, we have a circle of life. Myself, this young widow, this broken-hearted Bedouin soldier. Just like electricity has to flow through the circle, so too, perhaps the interconnection between our lives is coming to tell us something. 4 years later, I get a phone call. And I say, who is it? It's Mohammed. I was the soldier who was at your home 4 years ago. And every day I've read the letter that you have sent me about after our encounter. And I want to tell you, I'm engaged. Please come to my wedding. I went to the wedding, and a few days later, the director of Otniel calls me to his office and says, you danced really nicely at the wedding. I said, how do you know? And apparently, throughout the Arab sector, it's become viral, my dancing at the Arab wedding. Not because I'm such a good dancer, but I didn't have a bobby pin. So the whole time I'm dancing, I'm going like this the whole time. And for them it was funny, so they also started to go like this, and someone captured that, and that went viral. So for long afterward, they picked it up on Israeli TV. People would ask me, are you the dancing rabbi? So we have a few seconds. So in the chat, I will open up the YouTube, and you could download it if somehow for yourself to see the dancing rabbi at the Bedouin wedding. And again, a story of Rosh Hashanah that gives hope for the future. So I'll see if I could share this. Oh,
You
yes,
already
yes.
did. You put it in the chat. It opens up.
Okay. So now you have it on screen. So this is the rabbi dancing with the Bedouin soldier. Okay, so I think we've got into 9 o'clock. It's been a joy to be with you. And next week, Yom Kippur. Erev Tov to everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
A pleasure.
Thank
Take
you.
care, everybody.
I
See
heard that you were a Rav of some of my nephews in Otniel, the Almond boy.
Oh, yes.
Yes. And also that you're a mishpacha of a cousin, Naomi Freudenberger, is mishpacha of yours. Rafi is my cousin.
Oh, so we're family. Yes. Naomi's a very dear cousin. I was in California for a few years, but she was there, and we're still very close. Hashem. Okay, so
Yeah.
good to see all of you.
Yeah.
Take care.
Yeah, my brother sends regards. Yui sends regards.
Thank you. Thanks so much.